You find something interesting, you exploit it, you repeat it. And your workers, you reward them, you say thank you at the end of the day, and you give them raises. It's not that hard. When I started in the business, there was a woman who pushed around a mail cart every Friday, and she'd stop at your office. She'd pull out a blue envelope and say, Justin, here's your check. And she'd shake your hand and say thank you. Now you don't get a check. You don't get a stub. You get money in your account that you don't even check. You don't have that reward. You don't have that visceral endorphin thing. Oh, you check. Oh, look at that. Look at my paycheck. Isn't that nice? We don't even know how to reward people anymore. You know how basic that is? Talk about back to basics. We don't say please and thank you. Like, thank you is not the end page of a presentation. It's looking someone in the eye and say thank you for what you did. Like, when I get that from clients, that's why you win in the business.
You're listening to the Genius Scouts podcast with Justin Oberman and Aaron Zakowski. Join us each week as we bring you exclusive conversations with the business leaders and innovators you need to know about, sharing the secrets that fuel their success and power their personal brands. Let's dive in.
Aaron, today we have a very special guest who needs no introduction if you've been spending time on LinkedIn for the past 4 or 5 years, and especially if you've been following anything in marketing and advertising, but I'm going to basically give him one anyway. George Tannenbaum is a legend in the advertising world, a provocateur, a wit, and one of the most respected and feared voices in the industry, and on LinkedIn. And Aaron, he's basically the whole reason why I do what I do on LinkedIn. He's literally the OG advertising LinkedIn influencer. When I first got on LinkedIn 4 years ago, or even way before that, it was his voice. It was his voice and his blog over and over again. And I was like, oh, wow, you can come on here and say what you think and people will listen. George is also, by the way, Aaron, one of the rare second generation advertising people in the industry. Most people with parents in advertising don't go into advertising. But George's father was a copywriter who lays claim to having written Brow Cream's U.S. logo and a little dab will do ya. And later he rose to chairman of the agency he was working at. I believe, I'm not sure, George, it was either before, after, during, or taking a break from advertising. You also played third base for a Mexican baseball team.
That's when I was 17. Yeah.
When you were 17, okay.
Before I was shaving.
Before you were shaving.
Yes.
So you played third base in the Mexican Baseball League, which is super interesting.
One long season.
Other than that, couldn't really find much on your beginning in the industry. Maybe you'll speak a little bit about that. But sure. George has spent decades at some of the most iconic agencies in the world, including Ogilvy, RGA. He currently runs George Co. LLC, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of absolutely no one. And there he works with clients, including the World Bank, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and the copywriting and ads that he creates for them are absolutely stunning and amazing and thought-provoking and always makes you say, I wish I did that. In the past, he's also worked on brands including IBM, American Express, and Mercedes-Benz, and he's won more awards than we have time to go over here. But what really sets George apart is his voice, both literally and figuratively. He's the author of the widely popular blog Ad Aged, not to be confused with Ad Age.
They stole that from me.
They stole from, which George says he stole from them, where every day, I'm not kidding, every day he dishes out biting commentary on advertising culture and life. And George, you're going to have to share how you do that. His writing is equal parts hilarious, insightful, and brutally honest, and where he likes to make fun of the holding companies that now run the ad world. So if you've ever worked in advertising, you've probably laughed, cried, or rage quit while reading one of his posts. George is also a teacher, a mentor, and relentless advocate for creativity and humanity in an industry that seems to be losing both. And I think at some point, he also owned a bagel shop in the Hamptons. I'm not sure about that.
That was fiction, but
that was fiction. Okay, you made it sound very real.
Fictional bagel shop, yeah. Yeah,
well,
the things people love. Yes.
Right. Okay. He's the kind of person who tells it like it is, except when he's talking about bagel shops, even when it's uncomfortable. And I love him for it. A lot of people love him for it. George, welcome to Genius Scouts. We're thrilled to have you here. You can clarify anything that you want
I can go a little bit into my beginning if you, since you asked,
Sure.
Justin.
Yeah.
Though I had a father in the business, and actually at some level I'm somewhat third generation, because my father's brother, Sidney, was 15 years older than he, and he started what became Philadelphia's largest ad agency right after World War II. So from 1946 till today, there's been a Tannenbaum in the business. So that's roughly, that's almost three generations. If you do a generation as 30 years. Though my father was in the business, he did not want me in the business. He did not lend a hand. So my first job was actually writing catalog copy for Montgomery Ward, which was like a Sears-like entity in the United States. I saw an ad in the New York Times. I had a rough idea what copywriting was. I went down to a beige office. I took a test. I passed it, and they paid me $225 a week to write, soft leather upper, cushion insole, and a chart on sizes. And I did that while I put my portfolio together at School of Visual Arts. Putting a portfolio together back in the early 80s was not quite the Herculean task it is today. You could basically do it in 10 or 20 weeks after work for $300. You didn't have to go to a four-year college. And then from Ward's, which was, a tough place, but you learned to write every day. And the buyers were like clients. So you had you had 4 client meetings a day, because you had to get the information from the clients, the buyers. You had to write the copy. You had to get it approved. You had to do all those things you do in an ad agency. From there, I went to Bloomingdale's, which was the same thing, only it was print ads in the New York Times. We probably for 2.5 years, I did 10 ads a week. Now, they weren't fabulous. It was 100% cotton towels, now 40% off. But you got in the habit of showing up, doing your work, and making sure it was done right. And there were some fabulously talented people there, including a guy called John Jay, who went on to fame at Wieden & Kennedy and is now at Uniqlo, I think the president of Uniqlo. And John was the CD creative director there. From there, I got a job at a place that's no longer called Low. It was then called Low Marshak, and it had about 9 name changes while I was there. And then, then I got normal advertising jobs and moved on my way to kind of, what you'd expect from ad agency jobs, including the places you mentioned, Justin. Ogilvy.
Well, there's a lot of interesting things that you said there. One of them was that you say that it was actually easier to make a portfolio back then than it is today. I know a lot of people back then like to talk about how more difficult it was, because you had to actually like carry around a big suitcase.
Oh, yeah, that part of it.
You had to lay it out. You had to get it printed. If you made a mistake, you had to, it cost money.
Yeah. There was that, physical kind of aspect of doing it. But I think that I think there was a little more room for experimentation, because you weren't beholden to a tool that you could literally, write a headline, do a sketch, and do squiggles for the copy, and then type out the copy on a sheet of paper, put it side by side. So you could put a book together. The thing that I meant about easier was, I think we were a little less fetishized. Like I can't, for the life of me, understand what people could possibly do in 4 years of going to ad school. I can't possibly understand how that could be good for your mind. when you should be going to museums and playing baseball in Mexico and teaching and learning life. You're studying ads. That just seems like if you want to be a painter rather than painting, you're going to look at how brushes are made. It just seems kind of it seems kind of crazy. About a decade and a half ago, when my children were still living at home, my younger one in particular used to like the show America's Next Top Model. I think Tyra Banks was the host. And I would watch it and kind of my skin would crawl, because what you learned was how to imitate other models. You didn't learn how to be yourself, unique or different. And that's a little bit what I see in kind of the portfolio, the fetishization of the creative industry now. It's like, gee whiz, do something different. And when I used to look at portfolios, I don't really look at portfolios anymore. I'm not in that part of the business. I would see a sameness. It was just stultifying. So that's kind of what I mean by easier. If you had an idea and you had the confidence to sketch it, you could put it together. I mean, you might work on it for weeks and weeks and weeks like people do, but it wasn't about the your Photoshop skills or finding the right photograph or anything like that. If you could sketch, you could, and if you could draw a cylinder, you could have an ad for Ajax.
Well, what you're talking about is it resonates with me so much, because I was at the tail end of. I always joke. I don't even know if it's literally true. I always say it's like the tail end of the Mad Men era. Like when I entered advertising, Facebook didn't have ads yet. Like literally, there were still people standing in front of blackboards, waving their hands, talking about the stuff that was pinned on there. And we were doing TV commercials, print ads. We were doing stuff on the internet, but we were like playing with it. We were like, weird websites and stuff like that. There was nothing. We're having fun with it and doing extraordinary things. And then I remember where I was working at Mother at the time, and I remember when Facebook launched their ads, and I remember somebody saying, "This is going to change everything," and people are like, no, and like within a year, people's entire ad budgets went poof like this. I caught on, and I was like, oh, okay, I better learn direct response copywriting, because
Right.
that's all anybody's going to want for like the next 10 years probably. But also what you were talking about regarding like the books and stuff, I had computers and stuff, so it was like this hybrid. Like I didn't have to carry around a book with the ads and
That
stuff.
part became easier.
Yeah,
But
but
then getting a
it was,
response from someone became harder.
yeah, right. That became harder. But also, I remember my first day at an ad agency, and I walked in there, and we got the assignment, a junior copywriter, and we got briefed, and I went and I sat down, and for some reason I wasn't paired yet, so I sat down. I was with myself, and the creative director like walked by, and he's like, "What are you still doing here?" And I'm like, "I'm thinking." And he's like, "You're not gonna fucking come up with any ideas in here." And he went and he gave me. He's like, "Here, I was gonna go see this movie," and he gave me his movie tickets. Back when you actually had movie tickets, he gave me like movie tickets and said, "Like, get out of here, go watch this movie." And I was like, "Whoa!"
Where was this?
This was at Mother. This was also at Mother, and I was like, "Whoa!" And I got to tell you something. I did that. What's one of the first things I would always do when I would get into an ad agency, and pretty much anytime after Facebook came with the ads and stuff, I'd get yelled at. "Where were you?" I was out walking.
Right.
And it's like, but you need to be here working.
Right.
You need to be sitting at your desk writing copy. You need to like all that magic seemed to disappear.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I never worked at real liberal places, and I have kind of that blue collar work ethic, where I show up early and I type. Um, but that's my process. I kind of joke and say I spent 40 years in the business and I never had lunch. It was only at the end of my time at Ogilvy when I kind of had a breach that wasn't going to be healed with the team I was on, and I switched teams and kind of became an independent, a free floating ion within Ogilvy. That I would take lunch at work, take a walk during the day, walk for a mile, and come back like recharged and replenished and having had Chinese food. But I never did that until I was in my 60s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
no, I would say like that. My process is walking.
Yeah.
And which I learned by being kicked out of the agency at a young age. Also, I find it very interesting that you started in at Montgomery Ward, which has a long history of advertising, as you probably know. I think wasn't he the one that has that famous quote, like 50% of my advertising goes.
That was John Wanamaker, but
that was Wanamaker.
Yeah.
I always get confused by these.
Yeah.
But Montgomery Ward. Oh, that's Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Rudolph
right?
the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Yeah. And
so a copywriter.
There's a woman, and Justin, you're one of the few ad creatives who reads a whole lot of books on advertising. But did you refer to it the other day, Bernice Fitzgibbon on retail advertising? She wrote a book called Macy's, Gimbels, and Me, which is really an incredibly good book about her foray into how she got her job as a woman in the 1930s at I think Marshall Field in Chicago. And then her path was through when Macy's and Gimbels probably each had Gimbels nobody knows about, but when Macy's and Gimbels each probably had 25 ads a week in newspapers, and they were more crafted. She made a good living. I mean, she was probably making $80,000 in 1950 when that was a lot of money. Yeah, it's a good book. You should read it. Macy's.
I'm gonna check that out, because what it really reminds me of actually is the world's first copywriter, the world's first sort of self-proclaimed, like, I'm going to make money from this, and made serious money from this copywriter, a guy named Johnny Powers.
I don't know. Yeah.
Who wrote copy for I tell this story how many times, Aaron?
I've lost track of all your old stories.
He started it at Lord and Taylor.
Okay, yeah.
And then he went to Wanamaker's. Wanamaker hired him, and he was very famous for these ads that were like, his motto was eventually it became known as the power style. And whenever you read ads basically from the 1890s to the 1920s, and even books on advertising, everybody was writing in this power style, which was like very short sentences. It's like almost like reading like a list. Like when you're reading, like he had like one of his ads, for like Murphy's varnish was like, the best goods means simply the goods most perfectly adapted to their use. Like that's how the ad starts.
Right.
And his philosophy was, your first job is to your first job is to be interesting, and your second job is to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And if you can't tell the truth, you need to fix it so that you can. And he famously, he when he went freelance, and he was making like $500 a day in the 1890s, which is like unheard, that's a lot of money. And a store came up to him and said, "We're going bankrupt. We need help. We need you to bring more stores." And he goes, "Well, that's exactly what you need to say." And like Wanamaker would get furious with him because he would walk around the store and the salespeople would tell him like what's going on. And they said, "Oh, we got these rotten gossamers raincoats, and we don't know what to do with them. So the ad the next day just started with, we have a lot of rotten gossamers and things we want to get rid of. Like he would just write these every day.
Yeah.
And
Truth well told.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of copywriters, like it seems like a lot of the best copywriters actually come from this world.
Well,
Like,
I know, Chris Wall, famously of Ogilvy and Apple, IBM, Apple at Chiat and BBDO West, and for a short time Wide. And, Chris worked at Robinson's, which is an LA chain. The things that it taught you were speed, not to be afraid of the page. And as I was mentioning in my little introduction, the kind of getting along with clients, talking to them about what their needs are, and getting used to doing work and selling work. So, I didn't have the confidence to say it back when I got my first agency job, but by the time I got my first agency job in 1984, I can say it now, I had probably produced 2,500 ads. So, like, I wasn't afraid, because, every week for 50 weeks a year, you produce, 10 or 12 ads. And, that's a lot of ads. And catalog pages, you produced hundreds of catalog pages. Mm-hmm. And so you weren't afraid of type. You knew something about type sizes. You knew something about how to cut copy. You knew something about how to get along with drunk art directors, and you knew about deadlines, and all that stuff's really important. So I think it was a crucible. It was, you didn't learn in a theoretical way. You learned in a hands-on way. And for me, that's the best way to learn. But that's my style.
I actually want to ask a question on something George said a little bit earlier, and maybe it'll segue into where you want to go. But George, you mentioned earlier that creating a portfolio or a book was easier back then than it is now because of all the sameness that you're saying that the industry kind of creates today. And again, I'm not coming from the advertising world, but I'm thinking about it more just from a creator world that we live in today, whether it's on social media or we're blogging or writing anyplace else. And there is this sameness, and especially with AI, where people are just modeling their writing and their style on other people, and they're learning from the gurus, and they've got templates and all these things as people are taught how to build their personal brand or anything like that. But it would seem to me, based on where this conversation is going, that because of this sameness that exists, that the unique voices, if you can create one for yourself, really have an opportunity to stand out because of that. I mean, I see people like yourself, Justin on LinkedIn, who just has a very different style and is very successful on the video side on LinkedIn. We see people like, what's his name, Justin Lewis Butterfield, right? The video guy. They're just doing unique things, whereas everybody else is the same. It would seem to me that creates a new opportunity to actually make it easy to stand out. I'm curious what you would think about that.
Yeah, I mean, differentiation is what advertising's about. I mean, if you're the same as everything else and you don't explain why you're different, why should somebody choose you? And this is a game that's about getting chosen. I always say to people, if someone calls me, if a client calls me, this used to happen quite a bit. If a client calls me and said, I have a niece or nephew or son or daughter who thinks they want to be a copywriter, will you talk to them? Of course I'm going to say, yeah. And then usually what I do, the first thing I ask that person is, when you go to a grocery store, like a Whole Foods, a high-end grocery store, a gourmet store, like in New York, like a Baltucci's or a Zabar's, I don't know what's in a Gelson's in LA. Mm-hmm. When you go to one of those places, and there's usually a wall that's 6 feet high and 5 feet wide with 175 mustards or olive oils or balsamic vinegars, right? You know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And how do you choose one, right? I just went on the Whole Foods site, and there's 261 different olive oils. How do you choose one? Well, if you go on LinkedIn, there's 261 different copywriters or pundits or whatever it is we freaking do. How do you choose one? So our fundamental issue, if you're using LinkedIn as a marketing tool, which why else would you use it? Friendship, I guess, but that's marketing too. If you're using it as a marketing tool, you have to say what makes you different. Because there's a shitload of people that say blank, name, copywriter, or name content creator, or name something. It's like, well, I don't have the time to look at your work. You haven't done anything to make me want to look at your work. So how do I pick you? It's not really that different if you can flash back to third grade and you're picking kids for your kickball team. The kid who's, at the age of 9 is 6'1", 210 is going to get picked. The kid who is really fast is going to get picked. But most people, it's like, I don't know. I guess Roger. I'll take Roger. But we're selling ourselves. We're putting ourselves out there. We're creative people. We're selling ourselves. Whatever it is we do, whether we make AI, we make an olive oil, or we write copy, we have to find some way of saying, I do something slightly different. Otherwise, why would anyone choose you? How do you stand out?
So, that's really kind of that's like brilliant. Like, because I would love to actually double down on this, because what I was going to say was, one of the interesting things that what you're talking about is you started your career mostly doing the type of copywriting that I don't want to call it direct response copywriting. No,
yeah, it was the lowest form. It was embarrassing.
Well, so what's interesting about that is I know a lot of people in the brand world. I have a really good friend who, Aaron and I, a mutual friend who spent most of his time in advertising, straight from college or straight from whatever into working at the big agencies, and he was making commercials for Verizon, which we're just commercials for Verizon, if we're going to be honest about it. And today he's making some of the most provoking advertising for the law firm Morgan & Morgan.
Oh, I must know him.
Carlos.
Okay.
But what's interesting
I know
about
his Jewish last name partner.
Aaron Fried.
Yeah.
The dynamic duo.
The dynamic duo.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about his story, right, is that I remember when he started getting into it, and I was doing some work with him for some startups, and he was asking, having me write copy for it, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's a startup, it's an app, they need basically direct response copy for this, and he was making me no, the copy's got to be like this and this and this, and I'm like, that's not going to work for them, or this, he never had spent time in that world, and he and then when he got to Morgan & Morgan, he had kind of big fights about it, and then he eventually kind of solidified the two. And Ogilvy talks a lot about this. He says that, right, every copywriter should spend their first 2 years whatever in direct mail at the time, is what he believed. Yeah. And you started in direct response, and it seems like you have a little bit of that bias about direct response. I mean, I think there are some Eugene Schwartz and Sugarman. There are some really stellar direct response copywriters. I'll let you comment on that too. I didn't mean to. I'm kind of mincing things here, but fine. What I wanted to say was, okay, I'll let you comment on that first.
No, I mean, I always resisted classifications. I never liked, he's a direct response copywriter. He can, or she can only do direct response, or she's a brand copywriter. She can only do this, or, or he's a shortstop. He can only play shortstop, so on and so forth. I always resisted that because I think it's too limiting to things. Justin, you've probably run across Dave Trott in your travels, in your online travels.
Of course.
And Dave makes it really easy, in his predatory thinking series, where he draws the upside down pyramid, and the first tier And he says all communications from a newborn baby till the most sophisticated, expensive ad to a Van Gogh have to work this way. The first tier is impact. If we don't get your attention, all of this is, if I don't get your attention, you're not going to notice. You're not going to look up from your whatever. You're not going to, you're just going to turn the page or leave the room. Second is communication. And this is kind of what you just said a moment ago. You use different language. Second is communication. That's the telling the truth part. Like, what does the thing do? What does it do for me? Why is it important to me? What's the humanity, the empathy? And the third is persuasion. And we dial up or down persuasion, depending on, where we're working and what the mood of the day is. But that's all communication. That's not advertising, brand advertising, direct advertising. You got to be interesting. You got to get noticed. And, if you look at, I have a few here. If you look at old awards books from, say, what I would call kind of the glory days of print advertising, this is the One Show 2. A lot of the stuff that won gold awards, for BMW at Ammirati and whatnot, this is from 1979. A lot of that stuff had coupons in it. So in the kind of overly literal thinking that so many of us fall prey to, you'd say, oh, well, that's a direct ad. It has a coupon in it. Well, what ad isn't direct? I have to get your attention. I have to direct you towards action. I have to get you to do something, or why am I doing it? I mean, I don't understand the classification. I know there's a category called direct ads that rely on data and CRM and things like that, but they still have to be good communications. I'm not going to data my way into getting you to do something. I haven't seen that yet. So I don't really understand, the classification. The thing about, that work starting in retail or direct or whatever you want to call it forced you to do was to say, well, I'm one ad of 70 in the New York Times today. How am I going to get people to notice my ad? And, a lot of retailers don't really care about that because we've got the Bloomingdale's logo and a really pretty model, is it wrapped just in a Fieldcrest towel, so that'll get attention. I never really believed that. I always thought we had to fight a little harder to get attention. My mentor in the business, Steve Hayden.
Whoa.
Your
mentor was Steve Hayden?
I was lucky. I'm still lucky. We're friendly still. We still talk. But my mentor in the business, if he met you, you were sitting across the table from him, nicest man in the world, would say, what was your birth order? Are you firstborn, secondborn? I remember him doing this to me. And you think he's just making conversation. And I go, I'm secondborn. He goes, oh, good. Why? He goes, because firstborn children don't make good advertising people because they always got attention. Secondborn people, secondborn, third, last kids, they have to get attention because their moms are paying attention to the oldest. So you've got to stand on the table and drop a pot, or you're not going to get attention. And I don't think he's wrong. I mean, I'll say that positively. I think he's right. The kids we have to get attention. And I don't care if it's direct or indirect or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I think you're either good at what you do or you suck at it.
Wow. So yeah, I'm a firstborn. I'm a firstborn child, but hold on. My brother was an adorable redhead with freckles.
Okay.
So I grew up. He got all the attention, and I had to fight for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had a better physical brand than I did.
But Steve would be the first to tell you, no rule is
no, it's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Aaron, I have a book back here that's got a lot of Steve Hayden stuff in it. I'll catch you up to what what we're talking about.
I mean, the idea there about being firstborn, I mean, it resonates with me. I am a firstborn, and honestly, I'm not generally out there trying to grab attention, and I'm probably not the best advertiser. There's a lot of other things I'm good at in the marketing world, but grabbing attention is not
Yeah.
necessarily one of
I
them.
mean,
And if I'm on
Steve
something, I was the prince.
was speaking for effect, but I can understand it. And as a second
No, it
parent,
makes sense.
I could get
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
It goes back to that Johnny Powers thing. Like, your first rule is you got to be interesting. You got to get people's attention, and the second rule is tell the truth. But I'll tell you,
Well, I would say, like, from a brand point of view, let's say Budweiser was the firstborn beer. It never had to be as interesting as Miller because they had the money to be persistent. Whereas Miller had to be, we're introducing light beer. Nobody wants light beer. We better be good. We better get attention somehow. So, I think it's kind of like underdogs. To your point,
Yeah.
Justin, you're competing against an adorable red-haired kid. It's finding what makes you resonate.
But what's really interesting is what you said before, and I don't think a lot of people look at it this way. Like, you go to the store and there are, 50 mustards on the shelf. Why do you choose the one that you choose? Like, what? I mean, I choose Batamta. Why? Because that's what my father had. But but that's a reason, right? Like that. And if I'm making ads for a competitive mustard, I should need to know that information, because that will maybe help me compete with Batamta in some way or whatever. But the point is you then went and said, it's like the same thing on LinkedIn, when it comes to quote unquote a personal brand, right? You have all of these copywriters out there. How do you choose which one that you're going to work with? And it's the same process. And I think that what happens a lot of times is people get sort of like, when they make that transition, and even though they'll use a term like personal brand, but they'll think, oh, because it's me, and they'll go into like kind of a sales mode, and they'll start using sort of hard sell, more direct responsey type, like approaches to just like getting your attention. They'll start focusing on hooks
I
and
think
tricks.
it might
and
be
this.
worse than that. I probably get one person a week reaching out to me saying, I've been working for 12 years. When I was at Ogilvy, I mean, the whole, they probably, fired in aggregate 70% of the creative department, over
Right.
5 years, let's say. I mean, that's not disparaging. That's like demographics. They completely changed the place, and the place completely changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would have people who were EVPs, ECDs, who worked alongside me, and they'd say, I just lost my job, and the talented people, and they'd say, what do I do? And I go, well, what do you do differently? What's your positioning? And I go, what do you mean? I'm just a good copywriter. There's a lot of good copywriters. I mean, I literally just had one of these. And what do you do differently? And, in baseball, since we started talking about baseball, Ken Harrelson, the Hawk, who is a middling star in the late 60s, early 70s for the Red Sox, and he became the White Sox announcer. When he was the White Sox announcer, he had a thing called TWTW. A player either had TWTW or he didn't have TWTW, or TW squared. What's that? The will to win. I mean, somehow you have to have the will to win. And that's usually a distinguished. We're on this phone today because we all had something different that we wanted to be noticed. Like, we're not just sitting at home. I mean, I got shit to do, but we're doing this, and we're going to get noticed, and there's a 1 in 7 chance we'll get a phone call from it. So that's okay. I'll do that. I'll take that risk, but we're doing something, and we're distinguishing ourselves. And you think about how many brands don't bother. Not only can they not say what they do, they can't say what they do, much less say what they do differently.
or even do it differently.
Yeah,
Most of them are
no, I
copying
mean,
their
I
competitors.
always say, look, I have an old car. I'm happy with it. It works. I know I'm supposed to get a new one because it's old, but I don't really need to. It works. But if I had to buy a car now, I have no idea how to buy a car. They're all the same. They all have the same. They all run the same commercial. I have no idea what the difference is between a Toyota, a Honda, a Nissan, a Kia, a Hyundai, a Mazda. Or the Germans. I have no idea what makes a German car worth $10,000 more than a Korean car. No idea. And
Which, for better for worse, though, what about Tesla?
well, it's for worse. It's so disgustingly tainted for me, and I
But at least that's a differentiation
yeah,
of some kind.
but I've also read enough to know or to believe that the infrastructure just isn't ready for electric
Got
yet.
it.
And
Got
and
it.
so that's kind of what I've heard word of mouth. So
Mhm.
that might not be fair, but it's what I've heard.
Well, I was just focusing on the differentiation part, not the
Yeah.
actual car. I mean, at least it seems to have personality. But getting back to it, because one of the things that's like sort of interesting. So what what I did is I was doing advertising and stuff like that, and then I kind of burnt out from it because I'm not such a good businessman when it comes to this and my agency and stuff. But I I realized that I built this personal brand on LinkedIn, and so I started just saying, hey, I'll do the same thing. I'll help you out. Like I started coaching, and heads of agencies, started to taking me up and hiring me, and help. And I coach write for them.
Right.
I help them with LinkedIn about what to say, and because I have all this background about advertising, I could write about direct response. I can write about all the philosophies like I believe them,
Right.
and I can help you really get your message out there and be a distinct thing. And what and so, like, in a way, it turned into this sort of ad agency but for people, right? Like for personal
Right.
brands. And one of the things I noticed, that what you said that really kind of resonated with me, and I didn't realize that we're kind of like a little bit being kind of like a George Co, but for people, which is that um, all the other gurus and stuff, what they really focus on, is like helping people create like these sort of templated, you know, um, you know, posts and stuff about, and getting short-term leads and stuff like that, which is important. I'm not saying that that's not important, but that's not what a personal brand is. And so I kind of almost see it as this hard sell versus soft sell approach. And no one's talking about this thing that it's like, yeah, but who are you?
Yeah.
You know,
What do you do? What do you do?
but I want to ask you a question. Like, the thing that makes you stand out, that could be anything, right? It could be linked very much to, say, like a certain skill that you do. Like, you're a comedy writer, like you're really good
Right.
at writing comedy. But it could also just be, and I think a lot of the direct response copywriters were really good at this, because at the end of the day, they all kind of did the same thing. I mean, they had like their own little styles and stuff, but it also could just be like your persona, like the way you, like, I'm going to talk about personal branding, but angry.
Right.
I have a term for this with, maybe you'll appreciate it, with Aaron. I always ask clients, what's your eye patch?
Right.
The story with Ogilvy and how
Yeah.
he put the eye patch on, and that's
Right.
what's different.
Well,
Like,
there's a story. There's evocative.
yeah.
Yeah. So you asking me what my eye patch is?
Yeah, no. So, like, what's your, like, we know what yours is. I mean, anybody that goes on there, like, just like senses it immediately. But like, what, like, so you were giving advice to people who are coming to you and saying, like, what do I do? Right. So, like, what's the advice? It's because it's going to be like, it sounds like it was about to be very counterintuitive to most of the advice that's out there on LinkedIn.
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, this is what happened to me, and this is how I learned. I was at RGA for 5 years. I was fired at the age of 56. Okay? 56 is not a great time to be fired in advertising. No time is great to be fired, but 56, I was old. So I had no idea how to get another job. My portfolio was okay, but it wasn't, I didn't have any recent can escapades. I was working on dull brands, even though I was at RGA. So like, what do you do? So somehow, I got lucky. I wrote a note to a friend of mine who needed a copywriter for 2 days, and he happened to be housed within Ogilvy, and he was renting space within Ogilvy. So I was invited up to Ogilvy where I had worked before. And it's funny how life works. So Ogilvy had sets of desks, and then they had like work tables, with flat files and desks and flat files, desks and flat files. So the place was full at the time. I didn't have a desk. So I sat at the flat file. So I was elevated. I was up above everyone else, so everyone could see me. So the people who used to know me from, I was there 12 years earlier. The people who used to know me saw me, and, hey, George, how you doing? So that helped. And then, because I was there and because I knew some people, I started getting, people would say, hey, can you help us on this? Can you help us on this? And yeah. I'm not going to say no. And they kept on re-upping me. The guy I was working for directly re-upped me, and then Ogilvy said, well, can we share you? So yeah, of course you can share me. And then the CCO of the place is Steve Simpson. And Steve Simpson, enormously talented, enormously prestigious, and he's running IBM. And I said, well, that's what I want to do. I want to work for Simpson on IBM. I have IBM experience. I want to work for Simpson at IBM, on IBM. I said, but I'm 56. How am I going to get this job? And I said to myself, well, the only way I'm going to get this job is if I position myself. I never wrote this down. I never said this to anyone. But I said, I am the world's best copywriter at making really complicated technology simple.
Yep.
So every time I got asked to do something, I tore it apart, man, and I made it simple. I made it really good. I made it really sexy. I made it really easy to understand. And before long, Simpson noticed, and he said, that George is a good writer. And then he offered me a job. And it's like, but I positioned myself. I said, this is what I do. I didn't just say, yeah, I'm a good writer. I mean, there's a lot of good writers. I was cagey. Steve showed up at 7:30. I showed up at 7:30. I mean, why wouldn't I? Like, it would be the same thing if I was dating a girl. I know she walks home on Main Street. I'm going to walk home on Main Street. That's what we do. Dogs do it too. They sniff where other dogs sniff. So why shouldn't I do it? That's what I did. That's what people got to do. They got to figure out. They have to figure out how to get noticed. I mean, I'll tell you, this is a true story from when I was 13 and playing baseball. So I was 13. I was brand new in a school. I was ninth grader. I was a year ahead of most kids, December birth. And I went out for the baseball team at 13. I was always a good baseball player. But I didn't know anyone. I was really shy. I didn't know anyone on the team. And there were a lot of upperclassmen on the team. And for whatever reason, I couldn't go to the first practice. Maybe I had a dental appointment or something like that. My mother didn't let me go to the first practice. I was 13. And so I show up the second day, and the coaches, I had no idea who they were. They all knew my name. And I go, how do you know my name? You don't know if I'm a good player. You don't know if I suck. How do you know my name? And I thought about it, and I realized what happened was there was roll call because you had to sign up on a sheet of paper. There was roll call, and they go, Tannenbaum? Nobody answers. They go, Tannenbaum? Nobody answers. They go, Tannenbaum. Is anyone see Tannenbaum? And Tannenbaum isn't there. So I showed up the next day and said, hey, I'm Tannenbaum. I'm sorry I couldn't make it yesterday. I should have let you know, but I couldn't make it. They go, oh, you're Tannenbaum. Everybody knew my name. I did something different. I mean, it's really that simple. Then you have to be able to hit.
Right. Then you have to be able to hit.
Yeah.
But I love that example, and I remember that example. I make complicated stuff easy.
Yeah.
I remember that, and I was like, and I remember because I was thinking, how do I position myself? And I'm like, I remember I wrote that down, and I was like trying to like, how do I use that formula to describe me? Like that's how banal I was at the time,
But
you know.
like,
And then,
what else would you do?
but what's also great about that positioning, by the way, is it doesn't pigeonhole to any medium because you could be you like I make complicated things simple for TV commercials, for video, for Facebook, for this, for like it doesn't matter where you're doing it, like that's what you do.
If
Whereas I
you're
think a
in an
lot of
ad
people
agency,
pigeonhole.
if
Yeah.
you were in an ad agency right now, I'd say, hey, Justin, you know the thing with the EPF? Well, I think we should port the EPF to the LDR, and then we'll get the EPF working like 180%. It's going to work 180% better. And I know a lot of people who are porting the EPFs. Nobody in the room, there could be 20 people in the room, nobody will raise their hand and say, what's EPF? So if you're the one who says, I'm going to raise my hand and say, what's EPF?
Yeah.
You win. And that's all making things simple
Oh,
is. I'm going to break the bullshit. I'm not going to fall prey to I'm not going to do what everybody else does. I'm going to actually say, I don't understand this. Would you explain it to me? And then when you don't understand it again, I made someone cry at Ogilvy, and I'm kind of proud of this. So a woman comes in, the IBM team was a crackerjack team, and I'm super fast copywriter. So this woman comes in and she's gonna head project management on the IBM team, big team, and I happen to have known her from RGA, and she comes in all a house of fire, and she's standing. We had this Monday meeting with all the senior people from account, planning, creative, media, and project management in this case, and now executive leadership, and she comes in and says, I'm hired because we need to make the IBM team more agile. And this is when every third word in an ad agency was agile. You remember, still is.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear the word agile like 11 times in about 4 seconds. And I say, so-and-so, listen, I know you, you know me. You know there's probably not a faster copywriter in the world. I don't know what agile means. If you're using agile for faster, you're not going to find a faster team. So tell me what agile means. And she couldn't do it. What does agile mean? It's a proxy for faster. I need you to work faster and cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me that. And then we can have a discussion about what it means rather than I have to adapt an agile methodology and there's going to be stand-up meetings and 6 Sigma scrums. Like, go fuck yourself. I don't know what it means. I literally, I'm not stupid. I read. I don't know what it means. I just got through with a client, my second oldest client. It's a $10 billion market cap company. And they come to me, they call me second. They call me when the first people they call can't do it. And they introduce this product. This is going to be what we're pinning our future on. I go, well, what does it do? Well, blah, 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 blah. Well, what's the moniker? What's the epigram that attaches to the product? Name of product. Pen. Writes words with ink. Like, I know what it does. So you have a technology product. What's your little ultimate driving machine? We don't know. I said, well, you need that. You're going to have it introducing blank on the website, right? And they go, yeah. And then you're going to say what it does, right? Yeah. Well, what does it do? Well, for 45 seconds. Well, what does it do? What's its first, what's its only, what's its best? What's its first, what's its only, what's its best? Justin, what's your first, only, best? You better fucking have one, or you're admitting you're second, one of many, and meh. I mean, that's the game. Right? It's got to be.
This is the stuff that goes on in my head all the time. Yeah, I mean, what does it do?
Yeah,
What? Just tell me the basics, brass tacks.
right.
Like, it's amazing how people complicate
I don't
things.
know what anything does anymore.
And by the way, if you don't know, when I'm taking this and putting this internally, if you don't know what that is, that's okay. Like, figure that out. Like, do some soul searching, right? Like,
Well,
or look at what you've
But the
done and let that
simplification is
define
quite
you.
complicated.
yeah. I mean, when I got canned, and at 62 from Ogilvy, and I knew if I went from Ogilvy to blank, I don't want to mention names. If I went from Ogilvy to an IPG shop or a Publicis shop or an Omnicom shop or a Havas shop or whatever they call it, I knew it was going to be the same agency. It would have the same macroeconomic influences that drive down prices, that drive up workload. So I knew I'd be having the same job, and I'd be let go again in another couple of years because I'm at the top of the pay scale, and I'm handmade, so I'm difficult. So I said, I'm not going to work for another agency. So I'm going to start my own thing, which is different from being a freelancer. So I go, well, how do I identify myself? How do I say who I am? So I'm not, I don't think I'm not smart, but I'm methodical. So I said, well, I'm going to look at every about section of every agency I can find. Have you ever done that?
Yeah. Yep. I have done that.
It's pretty depressing. We're at the intersection of blank and blank.
It's really, yeah.
Becoming part of culture, bringing creative to part of culture. Like, I don't even know what that means. I don't know what that means. I don't know what it means to be at the intersection of creativity and technology. That's not what I do. I mean, I've read every one of these. I don't know what it means.
I
I
think
literally don't.
you posted a thing of like Ogilvy's description of themselves, and you were like, he's probably rolling over in his grave.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was antipodal to we sell or else, or any of those other 900. I have them all here collected. Because respect, man. But I mean, what does The Economist do? There's 300 pages that
You
say
have
what
that
The
book.
Economist
Oh,
does.
wow. That's a coveted book.
I got two of them.
Oh, wow.
What I mean, they tell you what they do.
The red book. Yep.
You could have him look at our website and see if he knows what we do.
Uh-oh.
But you
I'm a
understand.
little afraid, actually.
Hey, we're an advertising agency, but for people.
Yeah.
That's why I said just keep it simple. We're a personal branding agency. I hate the word personal branding, by the way, but I say it because it's just the easiest thing that people understand. And now we're pivoting into specifically saying that we specialize in the soft sell approach, right? We make it so that people remember you, not just want to buy from you, or not just want to, that's probably not a smart way of saying it, but yeah, you're actually making me think very much more carefully about our way of doing it. It's like a fresh perspective. But George, I have a bunch of questions that I want to make sure that I get to.
Because I'm going to have to get going. But yeah, shoot.
So I'm just going to go down this.
Round. Yeah.
We love the salon style. That's the whole point of this, is to see where the conversation goes. But I do want to make sure that I hit these questions. Sure. I'm just going to go through them. We've seen the industry evolve from like the Mad Men era to the age of, well, like what we are in right now, programmatic advertising, performance marketing. What's one change you think has been actually for the better?
I can't think of a single one.
Wow.
I'm not being glib. I can't think of. I mean, maybe there's few. It's not all, white gentlemen. And you can't smoke in the office. That's good. But because I worked when my partner smoked, and it was awful. So it's slightly more egalitarian, but in terms of cosmetic makeup, but I think the uniformity and conformity in thought is worse than it ever was. So I can't really think of one good thing.
Where do you get the ideas to write about every day?
Well, here I've written about this.
Right.
So, and the metaphor I always use is simple. If you live in Southern California, you live in LA. So let's say you're a stringer for the Dodgers. And
I'm a Yankee fan.
Okay, let's say you're a stringer for the Yankees, but your territory is Southern California. Okay? So you're on the lookout for a long-limbed left-hander who can throw 93 miles an hour as a high school kid. Mm-hmm. So when you go walk your dog and there's a bunch of kids playing, you're looking for someone long-limbed who can throw, who looks like an athlete. You're looking for that all the time. You go to the grocery store, you're looking for it. If you're working on a toothpaste account, you're looking for someone with great teeth. You're always looking for this. So my job is to do something interesting every day, right? I have to write something interesting every day. So I'm always looking for an angle. I mean, I remember reading that when Woody Allen was 16, he got a job. I know I'm not supposed to say Woody Allen, but he's still funny. Regardless of what he did, he's funny. Or did or didn't do. Because nobody knows. But when Woody Allen was 16, he got a job writing for Sid Caesar's Show of Shows. He wrote 50 jokes a day. It wasn't just like he has a funny gene. He goes, oh, what happened today? What happened today? My girlfriend spilled soup. You ever notice when you spill soup, there's always a carrot that goes under the counter, and he starts writing jokes about that because he's observing and he has to write a joke. He's got a job to do. I mean, it's not that hard. You have a job to do. You figure out how to do it. I mean, so you find the idea. So I don't know. I walk my dog. I see, you write about, gee whiz, I've never seen so many, I'm in the country for the first time in my life, living in the country and seeing birds and springtime and joy and happiness. You write about that. Or, a lot of time I read a lot. So I read something in the journal by the former chief technology officer of Reddit and Facebook saying, maybe we're doing it wrong. Maybe the solution to everything is not technology. Maybe it's simplicity. And maybe technology is fucking us up. So if you can't write an article about that, you shouldn't really be in the business. I mean, so you read, you know what? I don't have a post for tomorrow, but I'll work it out.
Okay. You talk a lot about the holding companies. I just want to give you a chance to talk about this. And maybe this is the wrong way to ask the question, but why shouldn't brands today work with agencies that are with holding companies? Or why should they be more careful?
Well, supposedly, a lot of clients and a lot of holding company agencies, a lot of agencies in general are selling this thing called performance marketing. Where's the performance? I mean, in the holding company, where the fuck is the performance? Where is the benefit of scale? So I could look at, I really don't want to mention names because I've been told to be more positive and less mudslinging. But what happened to Ammirati? What happened to Scali? What happened to Carl Alley? What happened to Levine? What happened to any number of great agencies after they got bought? Where did this soul go? And, one of the things on my LinkedIn site, on my LinkedIn, is that I believe there's something special about working with a founder. Somebody who cares passionately about his or her own success and understands your success and how important that is. And, a major agency, digital agency of the decade, whatever it is, was just bought by PE, private equity. And to my eyes, they kind of blithely said, oh, this is great. They're going to just give us $50 million to invest in making us contemporary. That's not how private equity works. Those guys don't have 14 acres in the Hamptons because they're giving money away. And if you dissect their methodology, they're not Mary Poppins. Sorry, they're not Mary Poppins. They're JP fucking Morgan.
I think what you said there is so interesting, actually, to work with a founder, like all these agencies, Ogilvy, DDB, Carali, when they were there, even Publicis, when it was run by Marcel Blanchett, were great places because you would work directly with these personalities. And I always said that ad agencies are, I always wondered, it's kind of weird that an ad agency goes on after the founder is there. Like, what does that mean? Like, when you buy an ad agency that has somebody's name on the door and is famous because of the work of that person, and then that person, like, are you buying that person? Like, it's a very, and like the personal brand has always been wrapped up in the agency founder. David Ogilvy was probably the person who used his personal brand the best to promote his agency. Howard Gossage did it in a very weird way. Bernbach didn't, right? Bernbach was very kind of,
Well, he had the work to speak for itself.
He had the work, so he had the work to speak for itself.
We've got a whole set of measurements now of things that are important, and I can't really understand why. Mm-hmm. Like, why is scale so important? Like, my work will not be as good if other people are doing it. Like, I don't know. When Shake Shack was one restaurant, it was great. Now that it's 20, it's not so great. Like, I don't think the intangibles that make something great can be replicated like nails or staples. I just don't think they can.
This is Howard Gossage's whole philosophy. It's why he never grew his agency past the firehouse.
You can have a system that cultivates good people, but I think at one level, most people will agree that even the most scrupulous people who hire people get it right only about 50% of the time. I can't say I'm better than 50% when I hire someone for a full-time thing. I don't hire people anymore. But, I have people I trust who I hire for jobs. But, hiring's a crapshoot. Well, marriage is a crapshoot. 50% of marriages end in divorce.
Right. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question, and I ask this somewhat pointedly for Justin's benefit as I think about our own agency, Genius Scouts. I agree the idea that the founder should stay involved and should give that special finesse to all of the clients. But I think what you're describing, though, is still a scenario where you're hiring other people to help get the work done under the management or oversight of the founder. I mean, the founder should not be staying with his fingers on every piece. There still needs to be some delegation that goes on, but the magic and the top level strategy and creativity and client relationships can still be managed by the founder.
Well, there's also, if I were a little smarter, more successful, I would say George Coe, the CEO's ad agency. And my whole philosophy would be, I'm going to sit next to the CEO and I'm going to listen to what the CEO wants, needs, and thinks. Not the CMO. CMOs are terrific, but they're never inside the head of the CEO like you want them to be. And maybe they don't understand the engineering. Maybe they don't understand the market. Maybe they don't understand the heritage. Not in the same way. They're a step removed. And I think that one-on-one understanding is what the best work that I do, the best I do for clients are I have a weekly meeting with the CEO and he tells me what he wants. He tells me what he needs and we argue about it and we fight about it and we have a give and take on it. But it's not filtered through 20 different layers. And it's not that you don't hire good people or people you can't trust or the people aren't as smart as you. It's that it's being filtered and interpreted.
Mm-hmm. That's the old way of doing it. Yeah. That's what I love. I love talking to the founder to founder. and getting things done.
I mean, I mean, obviously it's not scaling, and scaling today is everything, but, because you have to gin it up for the stock price, but I'm not sure why. I mean, I don't have a stock price, so I'm not sure why I have to worry about that.
I guess it depends on what the objectives are of the existence of the company. Is it just trying to make a living? Is it you're trying to grow the wealth of the owners of the company? And not thinking about it as a conglomerate or a corporation. Or is it just, your love of the game? I mean, I know my experience with Justin, and it sounds like, same with you. You have a passion for creativity, for creating, for helping. But sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a goal to make more money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get it. Yeah, obviously I'm being dogmatic, but
No, I think what you said, like, really, it kind of like hit it, and we hear it a lot too. Like, look, you're building a founder. If you're building a founder brand, it's going to be the founder. You have to think of your legacy. You have to think of what the plan is. Are you going to sell? Are you going to, are you going to try to pass on a torch, raise raise somebody, or are you going to do like the Steve Jobs and say, hey, you take over Apple, you run it your way, which, I don't know if that's so good for
easier
Apple
to
right
do
now.
when you have $1 billion.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, may we all have $1 billion.
Yeah.
I have one more question, and then we're going to go into something called a rapid fire round.
Okay.
So the last question I want to ask is, and there's probably too many for you in this, but what's one piece of advice you find yourself giving over and over and over again?
I'm really simple. Work. Just do the work. It's, the biggest change in my career has been somehow I've gotten rid of the inhibitions of being afraid of being found out I'm stupid. And whereas I used to have to struggle for the third ad in a campaign, now I do 50. And I just keep working till I get to 50 or 70 or something like that. Just do more. Just turn it upside down. Write it backwards. See if you can make it rhyme. See if you can make it the same backwards and make it a palindrome. Just do a bunch of them and just work. Just work. Just try shit. And yeah, that's how good work happens.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were a baseball player, I've written about this, where you're working on your fielding and you have two coaches hitting the ball at you at once. So one to your right, one to your left, one to your right, one to your left, one to your right, one to your left, one to your right, one to your left. Twice as fast as one person could do. And you just deal with it. You get hit in the face, you get hit in the shoulders, you get hit in the neck. Some of them you handle, but you just get fast. You just get good. You just do it. You do it.
Okay, George, we're almost out of time.
Okay.
But before we wrap up, we have a quick rapid fire round for you. Just answer the first thing that comes to mind. No wrong answers. Ready?
Okay.
I know what the answer to this one's already, I guess. Ideas or execution?
Ideas. There's no money in execution, to tell you the truth.
This is really interesting because you just said do the work, and but now you're saying that ideas are still more important.
Yeah.
I guess if you do the work without any ideas, it's kind of pointless work, right?
Yeah.
One book that every copywriter should read.
I'm a big believer in Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Everyone should read it, copywriter or not. That's the book to read. It's about purpose. It's about figuring out who you are and what's important to you and how you live your life with meaning and integrity.
I'm going to steal that one. Favorite campaign you've ever worked on?
I've ever worked on? I mean,
I understand if you can't answer it. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, the work on IBM was uniformly good, interesting, and important. Yeah. And the campaign, in a sense, lasted for 25 years.
I would also say that it's really good example of your positioning of making complicated things simple.
Yeah.
Like I love those.
Yeah.
I reference whenever. One time I was doing work for like a server. I had no idea what I was writing.
Right.
I took the job. I was kind of desperate for money, and it was like a server and company in France, and it was all this complicated stuff. And I studied your IBM ads.
Well, nobody knew at the beginning. I mean, I can tell you I didn't know at the beginning, because nobody knew what a server was. And I'm 6'2". My direct boss when I started writing server ads was 6'5". Steve Hayden's 6'4", and Chris Wall was 6'10". So it's like I imagined the four horsemen of the apocalypse stepping on my head, and I don't want my head stepped on. I don't want to. I'm not going to screw up.
Most overused buzzwords in advertising today.
Oh, Jay. I mean, I mentioned agile earlier, robust, AI, quantum, you name it. I mean, I actually hate the word content because I don't know. I lived 55 years without ever hearing it, and now you hear it all the time.
Yeah. What's the biggest misconception about the advertising industry today?
I think that it's an industry. I don't really think it's an industry, and I think, and again, I somewhat wrote about it in my blog today, that I think we've spent the last 40 years chasing after something new, forgetting to look at stuff, human nature that's always worked. And the same things, right after the Super Bowl, the Monday after the Super Bowl, I posted a blog post called 59 Spots because the Super Bowl had 59 spots. And I posted 59 spots that I liked because there was nothing on the Super Bowl that I liked. Mm-hmm. And I would say the majority of people who responded, and not a lot of people responded, but the majority of the people said, why can't we do work like this anymore? Because we're too busy doing a spectacle rather than communicating something. Mm-hmm. A stunt.
Mm-hmm. It's true. Well, part of it is probably the medium, but we'll have to have you back on to talk about that. If you were suddenly declared the king of advertising, what's one thing you would change overnight?
Overnight? I think you somewhat touched it a moment ago when you were talking about Gen Z or Gen Beta, whatever it is now, not showing up the first day of work. I think a lot of what's happened in the world is that we've lost punishment and reward. When I started in the business, did you know Howie Cohen?
He's one of my mentors.
Okay. You take someone like Howie Cohen, I imagine he went from $15,000 to $75,000 in about 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. That's gone. So why the fuck should I work hard? And, if you can't make it, why are you working? Like if you're in a salary band and you get a 1.5% raise every 24 months, why are you working? Yeah, there's integrity, there's personal integrity. I don't mean it that absolutely. But, 80% of our lives are dominated by giant chain stores or giant corporations where there's no competition. And the person who works in a Home Depot is going to be making the same $12.50, $17.50 an hour for the rest of their lives. They can't move up. Why should they work hard? I mean, I worked in a retail store when I was a kid. And if somebody asked where something was, I got out from behind the counter and I walked them to where it was. I didn't just go aisle 4. That's the way you do it. That's the right way to do it. But I knew if I stayed in that job, I'd be the night manager after 3 years. Maybe I'd be the weekend manager after 5 years. And maybe after 12 years, I'd be the manager and I'd be making a good salary. But it ain't like that anymore. So why work? I mean, I think that's why Trump won, to tell you the truth, because people can't get anywhere.
Mm-hmm. You can,
There's no progress.
2 more questions. You ready?
Yep.
What I find very fascinating, and actually a few of the conversations that we've had with people, is at no point in this conversation have we talked about AI.
Right.
And I find that so refreshing and also so interesting. So I want to ask you, what's your opinion about AI?
I mean, AI's fine, for certain things. It's not a creative tool. It can help render something that you've thought of. It's spin art. But it's not, and this whole interpolation of the word generative. I don't know if it's using something that someone else has already created. How's it generative? I mean,
I feel like you'd be walking around asking people, what does generative mean? Tell me
yeah,
what generative means.
I mean, I probably make 60% of my money from companies selling AI. So, but for my job, and people ask me this all the time, for my
Sure.
job, what do I need it for? I don't know what I don't know what I need it for. I don't know what I need it for. I don't know what it does.
Yeah.
I mean, I
For
know
me, it
I
helps.
understand the technology. Don't get me wrong. I understand it, but I also don't. It's a little bit like you could have asked me the same question on data. I can't come back to you with one example of, wow, look at this thing AI did. That's fucking, look at this play that AI wrote. It's amazing. It's better than David Mamet and Arthur Miller. This is great. Have you seen it? I haven't.
No. Everything that I've seen that people have said that it's that has ended up not being that. It's like, oh, AI, but then it went through editing, and obviously people had an interesting idea to put into it, and I think people forget that sometimes.
It's a proxy for cheap. Just
the
like
next
Agile
document.
is a proxy for fast and cheap.
So do you think it's going to be like the next stock image type thing?
I mean, I read all the predictions.
Yeah.
I don't. I want to see how it makes my life. Let me back up. I work for a lot of technology clients.
Sure.
I have this thing I call the Easy Pass test. Okay. When Easy Pass came out, toll booths went away, long lines went away, having an ashtray full of change went away. I could speed through a toll. Then they took away the tolls. It made my life better. I got it. What's the AI equivalent of the Easy Pass test? Does AI solve the Easy Pass test? Does it? No. I could argue the remote control in your living room solves the Easy Pass test. It wasn't really that big a deal to get up every 45 minutes, but I understand. But I haven't seen AI solve the Easy Pass test. You understand what I'm saying, right?
I do. Yeah.
I could argue it for a microwave, except the food sucks.
And even where it's made something easier, it's made something harder by making something easier. It hasn't really it makes me get the data together quicker, but then it makes me have to then do this and this instead of this, and it's like, yeah.
I mean, I bet you 91% of the United States
Isn't using it.
No, that's not what I was going to say.
Oh.
I was going to say would like to reduce their cable bill or the phone bill, but they don't want to deal with the AI-derived bot because it sucks. Yeah. It sucks. Period. I don't care how smart you tell me it is and how great it is and how it's going to solve things and how it cuts down on CSR. I don't care. It sucks.
So
it makes me unhappy.
Win. Humanity will win in the end. Or people who are more human.
Yeah.
Last question. If you were starting out today, do you think that you would be working in advertising and marketing?
No. They've turned it into a low wage industry, and I like money. They've turned it into someone I'm very close to is very successful. She works every day. She makes less than she does 25 years ago. And the worst part of that story is she thinks it's okay, because that's how the industry's gone. So,
is it also because it wouldn't be as exciting as it used to be? Like, it's kind of like being a Deloitte accountant, right? Like, you're not creative anymore.
I think a moment ago, Aaron, I think you said something about, you're finding people are calling you because they need X, Y, and Z. I think my job is really pretty interesting. Clients call me when they don't know what they do. And that's a really interesting problem to have to solve. Copywriting's a tiny, tiny piece of that. It's like, I've got this thing and it can do this, but I don't know how to explain it, and I don't know how to differentiate it, and I don't know how to talk about it, and I don't know how to infiltrate it through my company. And big agencies can't help me because nobody has deep knowledge in a big agency now, because we can't afford to pay for deep knowledge. So we're coming to you. You figure it out.
Justin, I think
That's a great job.
Our problem for us. That executives come to Genius Scouts when they can't figure out what their personal brand should be.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why I kind of jokingly say a lot of my clients call me second. They go to an agency and they go, oh, yeah, well, we got the buy one, get one free ad, save 20% on mouthwash, but nothing about why Listerine is different from Walmart or Walgreens mouthwash. We forgot how to do that. I can do a Toyota ad right now with Jan. We're having a Toyota-thon. It's, Corollas are $199. You don't need to be smart to do that.
I lied. I have one more question, but it's only because of what you just said. Bob Hoffman is famous for pointing out that
we're friends, Bob.
The only goal in advertising is fame. I haven't really heard you talk about that yet. The positioning and stuff like that. Do you think that that's an important part of it?
I think Bob might be using the word fame as the way I'm using the word differentiation. It's something that makes you stand apart and out. So if you have a baseball team and everybody's a pretty good 270 hitter, 14 home runs, and you've got Mickey Mantle on the team, he's batting 325 and has 54 home runs. Mickey Mantle is famous. Mickey Mantle stands out. Mickey Mantle does something better or shows up better in the box score or something. That's really important. And if you can do that through marketing, not necessarily performance, that's incredibly vital. And I would say in many ways, the best ads, the best of advertising has found minor details and made them fame adjacent features. So you take something like Volkswagen's old ad, after we paint the car, we paint the paint. You know that ad?
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about 11 pounds of paint on the car. Or the Economist book I just picked up. Is the Economist really that different? No, it's just they found a way to say you won't be a management trainee at 42 if you read The Economist. And they found it in a credible, replicable, repetitive, interesting way over time. Was UPS really the tightest ship in the shipping business? Was it really a tighter ship than FedEx or DHL? No, but they had a way of saying it. They had a voice in saying it. They had a procedure for saying it that went down to the way the guys wore their uniforms. That I think that's what Bob means by fame. I don't think he means making the stallion famous.
Mm-hmm. Well, George, we're very glad that you did enter advertising when you did.
I'm very glad I made a Megan the Stallion reference. So let me just say that's as good as it gets for me.
Yeah, and I was going to joke. You beat me to the punch, but we're very glad that you did enter advertising when you did, so that you can share all of this. I don't want to call it back to the basics wisdom, but just the wisdom that I think a lot of people need to hear, and a lot of what the industry has sort of forgotten.
I just want to pick up. I got to go, but I want to pick up on something you said. Back to the basics. So I have this idea. If I were running the Democratic Party, which is zero right now, right? No one gets it. I would run on the ticket of we're going to make government. I don't know if you have them in LA. So maybe I'd have to find a different metaphor, but it would work in New York. We're going to make the government work like a Greek coffee shop. We're open 24/7. We have a menu with something for everyone. We serve you fast, efficiently. The price is good. The food is good. You get in and out. It works. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's not pretentious, and it works for everyone. And that's basics. That's how you serve people. That's how you serve people. You find something interesting, you exploit it, you repeat it. It's not that hard. And your workers, you reward them, you say thank you at the end of the day, and you give them raises. It's not that hard. It's really, I've written about 42,000 times. When I started in the business, nobody talks about this. There was a woman who pushed around a mail cart every Friday. And she'd stop at your office and she'd pull out a blue envelope and say, Justin, here's your check. And she'd shake your hand and say, thank you. Now you don't get a check. You don't get a stub. You get money in your account that you don't even check. You don't have that reward. You don't have that visceral endorphin thing. Oh, you check. Oh, look at that. Look at my paycheck. Isn't that nice? We don't even know how to reward people anymore. You know how basic that is? Talk about back to basics. We don't say please and thank you. What the fuck? Thank you is not the end page of a presentation. It's shaking someone, it's looking someone in the eye and say thank you for what you did. When I get that from clients, that's why you went in the business. I mean, the best client response I ever got, better than any award, was I was working on a high-tech client, a pitch. And I wrote a children's book explaining what the product did, a literal children's book. And I presented it to them. I wasn't even in the pitch. I was brought down to present this book to them. And then 3 weeks later, the client came back and awarded us the business. This is when I was at Ogilvy. And the client came up to me and she said, George, for the first time in my life, my daughter knows what I do. I read her your book. You go, okay, that's my job. That's my job. What do you do? Make it sexy. Make it famous if you're Bob Hoffman.
Well, George, we wish you a lot of luck in your children's book career. And we hear that being a children's books author is a difficult path, but
I have no desire to do it. But I will tell you,
it seems like with enough clients, you can get a series going.
Yeah. I mean, but there is something. I mean, when I worked on IBM, I wrote a children's book. They never bought it. I don't know that it got out of the agency. I wrote a children's book explaining quantum computing. And, it was called The Tale of Two Kitties. It was about Schrodinger. And if you can explain it to 5-year-olds, the CEOs are going to love it because they don't understand.
See, Aaron, this is why I'm doing my adverzines, my little tiny zines on advertising concepts, like very simple explanations about curiosity.
How could I describe, what we do and why, personal branding is important as a children's book?
Yeah.
I think that might be something I spent some time.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. I mean, there is something, But that's kind of what I mean about going back to the basics. It's like, if it's powers, explaining why the gossamer camisole is important, like, let's explain why it's important. Let's explain what it does.
And that's what he does in his ads in 12-point Castellan and in 250 characters or less, or 250 words or less. Thank you, George.
Okay, well, thank you guys.
George, it was a pleasure. I've appreciated greatly getting to know you a bit. I understand why he's been talking about you so much, and I've learned a lot, so thank you.
Well, thank you guys.
Thanks for tuning in to the Genius Scouts podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more episodes, and if you're ready to take your personal brand to the next level, visit geniusscouts.com.